professional class. Joe was certainly smart enough, and he seemed committed. If she was thrifty and lucky with clients, Edie thought she could probably save enough this coming summer to put him through the first year of school. Guiding hunting expeditions was no big deal, like going out on the land with a couple of toddlers in tow. She knew every last glacier, fjord, or esker for 500 miles around, and no one knew better than Edie how to hunt. The chip of berg had melted, and she was unscrewing the top of the first thermos when a sharp, whipping crack cut through the gloom and so startled her that she dropped the flask. The hot liquid instantly vaporized into a plume of ice crystals, which trembled ever so slightly in the disrupted air. The hunter in her knew that sound, the precise particular pop of 7mm ammunition fired from a hunting rifle, something not unlike the Remington 700s her clients were carrying. She squinted across the sea ice, hoping for a clue as to what had happened, but her view of the beach was obscured by the iceberg. Up ahead, to the east of the beach, the tundra stared blankly back, immense and uncompromising. A gust of wind whipped frost smoke off the ice pack. She felt a surge of irritation. What the hell did the Halunat think they were doing when they were supposed to be setting up camp? Firing at game? Given their lack of enthusiasm for the shoot, that seemed unlikely. Maybe a bear had come too close and they were letting off a warning shot, though, if that were the case, it was odd that her bear dog, Bonehead, hadn't picked up the scent and started barking. A dog as sensitive as Bonehead could scent a bear a couple of kilometers away. There was nothing for it but to investigate. Until they got back to the settlement at Altisach, the men were officially her responsibility, and these days Edie Kiglatuk took her responsibilities seriously. She retrieved the flask, impatient with herself for having dropped it and spilled the water, then, checking her rifle, began lunging at her usual steady pace through deep drift towards the snowmobile. As she approached, Bonehead, who was tethered to the trailer, lifted his head and flapped his tail. If he'd picked up so much as a hint of bear, he'd have been going crazy by now. Edie gave the dog a pat and tied in her cooking equipment. Just as she was packing the flasks under the tarp, a sharp, breathless cry flew past and echoed out over the sea ice. Bonehead began to bark. In an instant, Edie felt her neck stiffen, and a thudding started up in her chest. Until that moment, it hadn't occurred to her that someone might be hurt. A voice began shouting for help. Whichever damned fool it was had already forgotten the advice she'd given them to stay quiet when they were out on the land. Up here, shouting could bring down a wall of ice or an avalanche of powder snow. It could alert a passing bear. She considered calling out to the idiot to stop him hollering, but she was downwind from the hunters and knew her voice wouldn't carry. Hissing to Bonehead to shut up, to herself she said, "Ekulia. Stay calm." One of the men must have had an accident. It wasn't uncommon. In the 12 years she'd been guiding southern hunters, Edie had seen more of those than there are char in a spawn pond. Puffed-up egos, in the Arctic for the first time, laden down with self-importance and high-tech kit, thinking it was going to be just like the duck shoot in Iowa they went on last Thanksgiving, or the New Year's deer cull in Wyoming. Then they got out on the sea ice, and things didn't seem quite so easy. If the bears didn't spook them, then the blistering cold, the scouring winds, the ferocious sun, and the roar of the ice pack usually did the job. They'd stave off their fear with casual bravado and booze, and that was when the accidents happened. She set the snow bee going and made her way around the iceberg and through a ridge of tunich, slabby pressure ice. The wind was up now, and blowing ice crystals into the skin around her eyes. When she pulled on her snow goggles, the crystals migrated to the sensitive skin around her mouth. So long as no one had been seriously wounded, she told herself, they could all just sit out the storm and wait for help to arrive once the weather had calmed. She'd put up a snow house to keep them cozy, and she had a first aid kit and enough knowledge.